So in this session, we are going to talk about the types of company. Let's try to understand what are the types of companies that a person can form. Let's talk about the companies limited by shares. We are going to talk about the companies that are limited by guarantee. Now, what do you mean by the word guarantee? Good morning and welcome to the third session on company law. This has been a very interesting journey for all of us to understand how the company law is framing today's scenario and situation when it comes to the business environment. So in this session, we are going to talk about the types of company. We have been speaking about the definition. We have been speaking about how the company has to take place in terms of the growth and factions altogether. And in this session, we are going to speak about the types of companies. Now, moving forward, let's try to understand what are the types of companies that a person can form and how does these types of companies really matter as per the Companies Act of 2013. So starting here, company forms businesses have become immensely popular over years. Why? Because today when I talk about a company formation, I have my own ideology in which the company has to be created. I might think about a partnership firm. I might suddenly think that, no, I don't want a partner. Rather, let me do this company all by myself. So in all this scenario, in all this thought process, what becomes true here is that every part of the company, every formation of the company differs in the way they function, differs in the way how it has been projected altogether. So that's why I say that company forms of business have become very popular. So when we talk about a joint venture or we talk about a merged business, we talk about a one-man company or limited by shares, there are different formats altogether, but each one of them come very much under the purview of the Companies Act. So there are certain prescribed forms. There are certain prescribed methodology altogether through which we are able to function as a company. Now, their development has led to the creation of so many types. Now, when we talk about this development factor at all in India, we have seen that right from 1991 onwards, post the era of liberalization, companies have started shifting their ideology in terms of working, in terms of operation. We are no more that same rigid manufacturing company. We are not involved in that brick and mortar kind of companies. Rather, we are interested in fast-moving, application-oriented, innovative-based companies altogether. So that is why I would always say that the development of companies through the Companies Act and through the fractions have really come up in a big way, and India is really seeing that phase of growth coming up naturally in the last 15-20 years. Now, similarly, companies are to be classified on the basis of liabilities, members, and on the basis of control. So let me just take a moment here again, coming back to this topic of saying the liability, the members and control. So automatically now we are talking about both the internal factors and the external factors. But then coming back to the internal factors here, when you talk about the liabilities, when you talk about the members and basis of control, yes, we have a lot of factors that have been looked into before you could be classified as a public, as a private, as a single company, unlimited, limited, so many factors. So, you have to understand the environment, the way how you have defined your company, the way how you want your company to be projected as an image before the public, the way how you want to see your members looking into the company. So all these factors are going to be discussed today, are going to be looked into from a Companies Act standpoint. Moving forward, let's talk about the companies limited by shares. No doubt, this is the most preferred kind of company that anybody can talk about today. Why is that? Because most of the time, shareholders of some companies might not pay the entire value for the share in one go. But in this, what is going to happen here is that you are going to raise the money from the hands of public. Now, you are going to become a publicly traded company, both in the BSE as well as in the NSE exchanges altogether. Now, which means to say that you have the option of going forward, asking the public that I want money to increase my capital. I need money for some extension activity altogether. So what is happening here is that moment you go public, you are becoming transparent, you are becoming visible to every single person who is trading through the exchanges. Now, what is happening here is that in this type of company, the liability of members is limited only to the extent of amount that is paid by them. So they are not going to become liable for the entire outstanding liability. But here what is going to happen is the shareholders are going to exercise their control into factor, which means now you are inviting the general public to be a part of your company. So each and every activity that you are going to do will be questioned by them. Why? Because they have invested in your company. They have invested in the form of shares. So they will have a right to come back and ask you if something is going to go wrong. So that is why companies limited by shares have got both sides. One side, you have the expansion power to raise capital as and when you like, depending upon the approval. The other side, you are going to be looked into in each and every moment, and you are going to be questioned about your factors. Followed by, this means in the case of winding up, members will be liable only until they pay the remaining amount. So that's where it comes into picture. The members can just go out of the company by paying only the remaining amount, but for the company, they have to pay back each and every rupee back to the shareholders on a winding scenario. But then, before we start going into the winding scenario, before we start even understanding the negative factor, the most important, the positive factor is that you are going to have a public image. You will have the capacity to go and dictate terms on expansion. You will have the capacity to enlarge, to diversify your operations. You will have the capacity to go back to the shareholders, convince and bring back more capital at any given point of time. Plus, if you recently look into the example here, none other than our great Reliance industry itself had the power to go forward and reduce their overall debt. And how they were able to do it is that they were able to bring lakhs of crores of rupees into the picture by bringing in again public investment. They were able to go and raise capital through IPOs as well as through the joint ventures, and a lot of angel investors coming into picture because being a publicly traded company. Today, Reliance has the power to go back and ask its 47 million shareholders, saying that if they want to start a new business like JioMart, or they want to start something like a Jio 5G, they have the power to go back to the public, convince them and raise money as and when they want. This is the power of being a company that is publicly traded. So you will have all the rights to be with the shareholders, and the shareholders have the trust in you. You can empower them and you can get your business ambitions satisfied. Moving forward, we're going to talk about the companies that are limited by guarantee. Now, what do you mean by the word guarantee? Which means definitely, yes, I am going to get back what I have invested. So I'm going to say here in a very, very simple manner, yes, it is limited by guarantee. It is definitely given to you in terms of your action. So what I'm going to say here is that the memorandum of association mentions very, very clearly that the amount of money that some members have guaranteed to pay. So that's what they have promised you. In case of wind up, you will get back your money. In case of winding up, they'll be liable only to pay the amount, so that the guaranteed that is being told there. And the company or its creditor cannot compel them to pay more money. So you can see here, the guarantee comes in such a manner that you only have to pay to the amount that is promised. You will not be compelled. You will not be forced by any other factors that to pay up the liability. So it's something which is, an internal agreement or a promise kind of thing, where it has been clearly told that the members of the company will be liable to pay only the amount so guaranteed. So they have already taken into account, they've already taken into picture that a member, suppose if he has to pay only 10,000 rupees during the case of winding up, that means this member will pay only this much amount and he will not be liable to pay the entire liabilities that have been told in the company. Similarly, in what is happening here is that these days people are more interested in going public and raising an IPO. When I talk about this word called as IPO, that is the initial public offering altogether, this is becoming quite interesting because people are finding it that they are able to level up the transparency altogether and also become a most preferred company in the eyes of shareholder. But there are still some companies existing in India which go by limited by guarantee. Now, what is the challenge of going by limited by guarantee? The challenge here is that the member will be only bothered about his money factor and he will not be truly committed in terms of taking up and looking into the liability. And since it's limited by guarantee, tomorrow if anything goes wrong in the operations of the company, tomorrow if there is a problem in terms of understanding the operational factors, or you're not able to derive the profit on the long run altogether, there is no way that you are going to compel anybody. There is no way that you can force anybody to take up something or do. So what is going to happen is that the member will be only worried about this factor that yes, I have to just pay back the money, what has been guaranteed, what has been told, and the remaining factor, the company is just going to shut down. So this might not be a preferable scenario when it comes to holding on people in terms of responsibility. Moving forward, we're going to talk about unlimited companies. These are only theoretical companies according to me. Why? Because in the modern era, when we are speaking about this kind of companies, they do not really exist. Why? Because let's have a look into this factor. They have no limits on their members' liability, which nobody wants to take a risk on this. Now, you cannot say to a member that there is no limit at all. The limit is endless. Sky is the limit. All these kind of dialogues might not be applicable here. Hence, the person can use all personal assets of the shareholders to meet its debts while winding up. Now, this is putting the shareholders into a very, very tight situation. Just because today my company is facing loss, just because my company is facing all kind of trouble, I cannot go forward and make utilization of all my shareholders' property and start winding up altogether. Now, this is putting my shareholders, my members into a trouble zone altogether. So I would not like to go in for this kind of a company. So 99.99%, in fact, if I have to step up, I would say 100% of the time, people will not prefer an unlimited company. Their liabilities will extend to company's entire debt. Now, let me just underline this point altogether. It is going to go on a liability basis to the company's entire debt. So, which is going to be really challenging enough. Why? Because if the company's entire debt is going to come on their head, that would not be accepted, that would not be liked by the shareholders. Why? Because company intends to make a mistake, company intended to make something wrong, and now that is going to fall on the shareholders' head, will not be accepted by the shareholders. So that's why they would say that we are not interested in going in for a company which is unlimited altogether. So this is why these kind of companies will not exist in the Indian business scenario going forward. Now, the 1% kind of company, just have a look into the image for a while. You will see that you have a 1% company which says minimum 1%, followed by private and public, which we will be discussing. But then when you talk about this 1% company, they have only one member as their sole shareholder. So there's only one person. So I'm the one person. I've started a company. I just want to be a one-man show altogether. I'm not interested in inviting public. Neither I'm interested in telling myself as a large diversified company. All I'm interested is that I am going on a basis of my own and I don't want to invite everybody. Now, there is a distinction which I would like to talk about. They are separate from sole proprietorship because OPCs or one-person companies are legal entities distinct from their sole members. They are different from the sole members. Unlike other companies, OPCs do not have any minimum share capital. So this is where the difference is coming in, which we need to understand. OPCs do not need any minimum share capital. So there's no prescribed value here saying that you need to start a company only with 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs or 1 crore. They are all one-person companies and they will not have any minimum share capital. So I would be even able to start a company with 10,000 or 5,000 or 15,000, whatever is my minimum share capital, and I am distinct from the sole members. So that is why they are separate legal entities. Yes, they have a distinct identity, they have a distinct mark, they have a distinct image altogether when it comes to factors of a one-person company. Moving forward, private companies altogether. Now, this is what is a very, very common factor these days that we are talking about, no doubt about it. Why? Because private companies are those companies whose articles of association restrict free transferability of share. A point to be noted and a very, very, very important factor here. If you look here, private companies are those companies where what you are trying to see is that restrict the free transferability of share. You cannot just barge in, you cannot just go ahead and say that, yes, these shares will be transferred to the name of my friend, to my wife or to anybody else. It is restricted within the private members. So in terms of member, private companies, minimum they need to have 2 and a maximum of 200. So tomorrow, if I'm starting a company called as ABC India Private Limited, automatically that private means to me that maximum of 200 and a minimum of 2 people. These members include present and former employee who also hold the share. So it is within the purview of the members that they hold the shares, they hold the values inside, and they are not allowed to transfer the shares to anybody else. Which means, again, what is the challenge that you need to understand as a private company that comes to the mind, that comes to the top of our mind, is that they will not be able to go on a capital extension or raising of capital at their will or wish. Why? Because they are a restricted company and the shares are restricted within the members. So for a private company to go ahead and raise money in the market becomes very, very difficult. They have to again talk only among the members. They have to start finding out external funding agencies like banks or financial institutions and go forward for it. Now, private companies also have their own beneficiary, like it is not mandatory for a private company to go and publish their results. It is not mandatory that they have to conduct an AGM, which is an annual general meeting. It is not mandatory that they have to go ahead and publish across all the minutes of their meeting. So they have their own flexibility in terms of running the company. They are the bosses of their own, no doubt about it. But private companies are limited in terms of transferability, in terms of access to capital, and also in terms of accessing any other future or special projects altogether. But yet, this is another powerful way of starting up a company, restricting with it and growing with it. This is one of the futuristic steps that any young entrepreneur will look into it. They want to initially start with a private company, slowly start moving forward and become a public company altogether. Now, moving forward, coming up to the big dream of the entrepreneur, the big way of showing up a company is definitely becoming a public company altogether. So what is the difference between a public company and a private company? In a public company, it is in contrast to private companies. The public companies allow their members to freely transfer the share. Now I'm talking about transferability. I am talking about the factor that yes, you will be able to transfer the shares based on your frequency, based on your availability. Nobody is going to restrict you. Nobody is going to say that you will not be able to transfer your shares. But yes, you will be able to freely transfer your shares to others. Secondly, they have a minimum of 7 members and a maximum of unlimited. That is where it's a big advantage which I would like to talk about. Now let's talk about an example here like Infosys. Why I like this company is that this company is purely based on their ethical values. This company started with all the intellectual minds put together, and they started developing as a company from a base level minimum software company developer, and today they are one of the India's largest in terms of the IT business. If you look into Infosys, they had the power of getting into a public zone, becoming a public company as soon as possible, and they were able to attract the talent from every corner of the globe. Today, Infosys has got employees across the globe, and they have the talent almost drawn from every single pool as far as possible. If you just happen to go through the website of Infosys, you will see the number of directors, the diversity what they have. That is where I'm trying to talk about the maximum number of members that is unlimited. So you don't have to restrict your members. You can choose the best of the best members, and with the transferability of shares coming into picture, there's always a movement of power. There's a rotation of power that comes into picture. Similarly, as I've already told you, the public limited companies will always have the power to raise capital. Today, if Infosys goes to the market and says that they want to raise a 50,000 crore for a particular project, I think that would never be a difficulty at all. Why? Because of the brand image, the equity, and the value and trust that they have created among the shareholders. So what becomes very, very evident from this matter of fact is that being a public company, maintaining an image, having the best of the members in the board, and having the operational capability will definitely make you stand apart, leagues ahead in terms of the business. So that is why going public at the initial level will put a pressure, no doubt about it, but will definitely take you in a long run and make you even more transferable. A transparent altogether. With it gives you a lot of value and trust among the shareholders. Moving forward, we are also going to talk about a kind of company known as the holding and subsidiary companies altogether. You might have heard about companies like ABC India Holdings, or ABC Amalgamations, or Coffee Day India Holdings. There are so many companies that you can talk about. Here, what is this? Is there the company owning share becomes the holding or the parent company. So they have the ownership on that particular company. Now, for example, let me say that I'm like a company like TVS. TVS will have several holding companies which are specialized only for their tires, or they might have companies which are specialized only for their auto components, but the major shares are held by the parent company, that is TVS Motors India Limited. So likewise, these companies who shares the parent company becomes the owner, and then they might have subsidiary companies also. Now what happens here is that the holding companies exercise control over their subsidiaries. That is Mondelez India. Now Mondelez India holds the Cadbury's brand in India. So now what will happen here is that the holding company is Mondelez and the subsidiary will become Cadbury's India by dictating the composition of the board of directors. So Mondelez India will decide the number of directors, who will become the board of director, who will become the CEO, who has got the position to become the chairman. Every single dictating terms will be done by Mondelez in the case of Cadbury's, because Cadbury's comes under Mondelez India. To give you one more example, Nokia. Nokia is held by HMD Global. So HMD will become the holding company. Nokia will become its subsidiary. So HMD will have the rights in terms of going forward and telling the board composition and the players who can be a part of this entire system. So that is where you see that the parent will have a stronger control in terms of the subsidiary factor. Now, most for the parent companies also exercise control by owning more than 50%. So that means automatically the majority stake starts coming into the parent's hand, and they will be able to control the subsidiary at any given point of time. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the associate companies. Who are the associate companies? They are those companies which have significant influence with others. So associate are those in which other companies have the significant influence. This means this amounts the ownership of 20% of shares of the associate company. Let's say that let's say that Tata goes in with an association with some coffee company, or Tata goes in with an associate company with some other in terms of motor. So now what will happen is that there will be an influence of the Tata group on the other company, which is more than at least 20% in terms of holding. The other companies can exist in terms of associate companies business, that is the coffee business decision, and come to an agreement. Now, this will be something like a mutual agreement altogether. This will be not on a dictatorship basis. This will not be on a commanding basis. So, Tata will be in a joint venture kind of thing, will be thought process altogether with that company. They will talk, they will agree upon terms, and finally, they will come to a agreement altogether. Now, associate companies can also exist under joint venture. So, this is what I was trying to say when you're talking about joint ventures with motor companies or with technology companies, coffee companies, FMCG companies, they have an understanding, they have an agreement in terms of sharing their technology, in terms of sharing their opinions, their views, their R&D, everything will come under a particular agreement. But yet, what will happen here is that there will be an influence of company A over company B. With this, I come to the conclusion of this session. I hope and believe that all the information provided is of a high value and of a great resource to you. In the next session, we will be talking about the corporate wheel and the lifting of corporate wheel, which is a very, very important topic when it comes to the Companies Act of 2013. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful session.